Hey, everybody, welcome to our weekly Data Talk, a show where we talk with data science leaders from around the world. Today, we're talking to Dr. Susan Schneider about her brand new book called Artificial You, AI and the Future of Your Mind. Dr. Schneider is Associate Professor of Philosophy and Cognitive Science at the University of Connecticut, and she's also the chair of the NASA Blumberg. Is that right? I totally messed that up, that intro.
Just say the NASA chair at the Library of Congress and NASA. Yeah, that name is long. The Baruch Blumberg chair.
That is so cool. How did you get started with NASA?
I had a project with them a few years ago, and we just continued working together. And this chair is actually out of the Library of Congress, too. So mostly I work out of the Library of Congress, and I'm doing meetings with members of Congress about the book, as well as public outreach events and events for staffers, congressional staffers, as well as members of Congress on artificial intelligence.
So before we get into your book, I was really fascinated about your background, and I was really curious if you can share a little bit about how you moved from your work in philosophy and then into AI.
So when I was a Ph.D. student, I was working with the top philosopher of mind in the country, Jerry Fodor. And back then, there were debates between the language of thought people and the connectionists. Connectionists, that morphed into deep learning. So for my PhD thesis, I was talking about these issues, about the scope and limits of computational systems, and if the brain itself was computational. My first book was with MIT Press on the computational nature of thinking. It's very dense and philosophical, not a trade book at all, very technical. But anyway, I always told my supervisor, who was, he thought deep learning, or what we then called connectionism, was mistaken, hopeless. And I always told him, I don't agree with that. I argue that the brain itself is a hybrid computational system and whatnot. So anyway, when AI started to really take off, it was inevitable that I would be getting involved. And boy, it really keeps you busy with the privacy issues and, everything that we have to worry about now.
It's just fascinating, the work that you're doing. And it's so cool to see how, because I think we need more philosophers in the room with technologists as they're developing AI.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not that, philosophers are going to come up with, new deep learning algorithms or something like that, although some might. I mean, there are philosophers who are logicians, for instance, and who may get intricately involved in those details. But I think that when it comes to the applications of AI and the understanding of what AI can and cannot achieve, it's really important that we not just listen to technologists. So as I argue in the book, as much as I, like Elon Musk, I mean, I'm a big fan of his cars, for example, to say that.
Yeah.
But the problem is that, when you start talking about the future of the mind or the future of the self, well, these are philosophical terms. And when you start talking about being able to become cyborgs and eventually upload to the cloud, I mean, that gets into philosophical issues there. And I think it's nice if we move forward with the development of artificial intelligence technology with a more realistic approach to what the human potential is and how we want to relate to artificial intelligence.
I love in your book how you began, and one of the themes is that thought experiment about the Center for Mind Design, where you talk about imagine, 50 years into the future, you're able to go into the Center for Mind Design and be able to hand pick these various, basically brain enhancements to improve your mind. Can you share a little bit about that thought experiment and what you were trying to relate?
So what I wanted to do in this book is really involve the reader and give them thought experiments where they felt like they had to make decisions about how to live their future. And so at the very beginning of the book, I say, suppose it's like 2040 and you're out shopping, and today your first stop is the Center for Mind Design, where you walk in and there's a menu in front of you, like what you'd see in a coffee house. But the items are things like Savant, where you could get like mathematical skills, or Zen Garden, where you could get the meditative states of the Grand Master, what would you pick? Would you get a bundle of several different enhancements? I mean, every professor would probably want the student name app, right? Students would probably want enhanced learning abilities like attention and working memory. I mean, there's so many things. If we could really do it, it's exciting. And then I say, and your next stop is an Android store. There you can get that Android to take care of your house. And boy, who wouldn't? I mean, like, wow, I could use one here. You know, clean up after everybody. But the thing is, you know, as convenient as these items are, and, you know, I talk about in the book that, you know, there are projects under development. For example, in Japan, they're building androids to take care of the elderly as part of their national effort because they have an aging population. Mm-hmm. So these are things that we're already seeing happen. But my point is, before we move in a certain direction, let's think about, of course, obviously issues with privacy and, you know, cybersecurity, but also what everybody's forgetting, which is, what is a self to begin with? I mean, can machines be conscious? I mean, there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of speculation, but I want to get beyond the hype. And could you really survive, like, uploading your brain to the cloud or downloading, you know, a bunch of apps into the mind? Or have we gone a little nuts with this computer model of mind?
When I was reading your book, I was thinking, oh my gosh, if my Roomba had a mind, was less like, I think the Roomba with me would probably get irritated. And to be like, why are you, my wife gets irritated because I eat in the kitchen. And then I leave crumbs there, and then I walk over to the table. And so if my wife gets irritated with me, if an AI had a mind, the AI would be like, why don't you listen to your wife? Why do you keep putting crumbs from the kitchen all the way to the kitchen table?
Oh, yeah. And you know, the funny thing is that, I mean, the Roomba's horribly dumb, right? I mean, it won't even let me, what everybody wants to do with it, we have one of those. We never use it. Put a cat on it and get it to ride, like, get the cat to ride on the Roomba. Won't do it. Well, I can't do it. It's in video.
Oh,
that'd be so funny. But anyway, yeah, so everybody thinks that when they have the Internet of Things, like, wired in their house, you know, could become like sentient. I say in the book that I think that's BS. I think it's highly unlikely that an AI company who's looking to help you turn on your lights, they may listen to your conversations and sell your data. Oh, yeah. But the project of creating a sentient being, a being that's conscious, is super difficult. And I think the first thing we need to do is realize that there will be AI marital therapists, for instance, like adjudicating issues around the house if you want them, right? But it probably won't feel like anything from the inside to be them. So, I mean, maybe the thing that I should say first and foremost is, here's what consciousness is. Consciousness is the felt quality of experience. So every moment of your waking life, and even when you're having dreams, it feels like something to be you, right? So, you know, when you smell the aroma of a burning candle, hear the sound of your favorite piece of music, it feels like something. And consciousness is what makes life so wonderful, but also so incredibly difficult. Now, it's an empirical matter whether a machine can be conscious. I argue in the book, there's no armchair way we can establish that the actual machines that the AI companies build will be conscious, right? So I think we just need to sober up about some of those issues.
Also love in your book, you have a whole section around, you talk a lot about what does it mean for a machine to be conscious. And you actually have kind of like a Turing test, the AI consciousness test, ACT. In that really awesome chapter, I think you called it the AI zombie chapter. It's like one of my favorite titles in the book. I think it's chapter 4. You have that kind of that Turing test. I love the idea that you were thinking through, if a machine has consciousness, how do we know it would actually have consciousness? Like, what would be the test And can you talk about like what were you thinking as you're kind of like developing like those questions? Like what questions would we ask the machine to determine it's conscious?
Well, okay, yeah. So I love that chapter too. I loved writing it and I loved working on it. So I worked on the AI consciousness test with Edwin Turner, an astrophysicist in the Department of Astrophysics at Princeton. And we worked on it while we were at the Institute for Advanced Study. And we have just had so much fun together. So I really have to thank him for, the idea to, question the AI. And, so what we thought would be useful is to realize that we already have problems understanding what's going on in the box of these deep learning systems. So there's the, black box issue that has been discussed widely. We even get perplexed when AlphaGo made certain moves. I mean, the experts themselves were like, what? And they had to go back and really think things through. So I think it would be the height of hubris to assume that if we really had these sophisticated AIs where we were wondering if they were conscious or not, that we would know what the algorithms are and be able to decipher the complex code of their artificial brains, right? And we can't do that in the human case right now. So we need a behavioral test first and foremost, one that, isn't looking in the box. And also, since deep learning systems change when the data changes, you could look inside the box, figure out what's going on, and the box changes later. So Ed and I thought, well, let's just be simple about it. Think about the test in Blade Runner where Rachel is tested about whether she's a replicant. A Q&A test like that isn't a bad idea insofar as the AI is linguistic. It has to be a linguistic system for us to even run the test. And also, there's one important element here. You can't cook it into the data or cook it into the code that the machine's going to respond as if it's a conscious being.
That's right.
So you really have to do this kind of thing at the R&D stage. But it's not unrealistic to assume that there would be tests at the R&D stage. As I point out in my book, if you're building a complicated system, you need to figure out whether it's conscious because you need to understand if you can trust it or not and what the impact of the spark of consciousness could do to the overall architecture of the system. Further, you need to understand if it's conscious because it's probably not going to be legal to make a conscious robot work for you, and it's certainly not ethical. I mean, what are you going to do? Make it want to clean your house? Okay, all right, pick up after Kenny the poodle, oh, you don't want to clean up my dogs? Okay, I'll tweak your settings. Now, Aldous Huxley in Brave New World talked about a similar scenario, right, where a whole population of genetically altered individuals lived on these pills, right, so that they wanted to be in their place in society. And we know that's wrong. That's a famous dystopian novel, right? So we need to figure out if a machine's conscious. And it's not silly. I mean, might be silly now to worry about AlphaGo being conscious, but it's not silly when we get to domain general systems that can creatively and flexibly move from one topic to the next. I mean, the question of consciousness is very important in the context of non-human animals. They're not as smart as us. So I think we need to hit the ground running and figure this stuff out as soon as possible.
I guess what concerns me is if the machine fails it on purpose.
Yeah. So it's kind of like kindergarten. You can't fail. So when you take a test in kindergarten, you can get a little star, you can get an A.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so if you pass the test, the star you get is you're sentient. Don't mess with it. Give it right. If you fail the test, it doesn't mean that a system isn't conscious. There could be other tests that detect it. So in philosophical lingo, the test is meant to be a sufficient condition. It's not meant to be a necessary condition, a requisite condition that every machine needs to pass in order to be considered conscious. I just see the problem with detecting machine consciousness is when you're going inside and trying to understand the felt quality of something's mental life, and it's not neural. It doesn't have a nervous system, and it may even behave differently than us. We need to have as many tests as possible. And over time, we'll develop a working understanding and more reliable tests. I also have other tests for consciousness. So there's one which I call the chip test, which I talked about in a TED Talk and in the book. And then another one I discuss, which has been very influential, is the integrative information theory by Tononi. I'm not a terrible fan of it, but I talk about it in the book.
What's been like the reaction from people who are like, this is not ever going to happen, don't worry, we don't need questions like this is kind of sci-fi.
Yeah, so now I'm in Washington, I'm on the Hill, and so I'm super, like, I'm a soccer mom, I'm worried as heck about cybersecurity. I mean, I've worked with the Defense Department. I worry about all kinds of scenarios that are here and now, like drones with facial recognition capacities. I mean, super long, right? And I'm worried about privacy. Okay, so a lot of people assume that just because I'm worried about more futuristic stuff, that somehow we have to only talk about one. And I think it might be because when Nick Bostrom's book came out, which was very futuristic and very important about super intelligent AI, the media took it and just blew it up, which is great. It's good that it got blown up, but every article on it was with a picture of the Terminator, right? And so that was real vivid. And so I think the people who are into the here and now feel a little threatened, like, hey, let's talk about what's going on now. Mm-hmm. And, my view is, look, we can do both. Everybody in the game is super smart and they realize this. So their knee-jerk reaction shouldn't be, oh, this is too futuristic, let's worry about now. The knee-jerk reaction should be to think about taking a precautionary stance, which, I talk about in the book. So when you have the possibility of future threats that could be potentially catastrophic to the human race, because the costs are so high, even if the chance is only 10% that we could create conscious machines, or 10% that people could really try to replace parts of their brains with AI components, we need to hit the ground running and talk about it now. Because if we move in a certain direction, what's going to end up happening is a lot of money is going to get invested in that direction. And then the AI companies are going to dig their heels in. We're going to start seeing lobbies, brain chip lobbies. I mean, follow the money, right? So, I mean, I think that's the problem. So I want to talk about this stuff now, because do it before it becomes fraught with political debates.
That's right.
You've got the Republicans saying this and the Democrats saying that or whatnot.
That's right. Yeah. It's interesting. You brought up the example of the Terminator. I feel like there is so many, when people think about singularity and the future of AI and will they have a conscience and will they want to take over humanity? I feel like there is definitely that storyline that's out there, that this AI, whatever it is, when it happens, when it develops a conscience and able to do things, it will want to take over.
Yeah. And so, this is anthropomorphizing. And it could be that if we have a highly intelligent AI, I mean, what Nick Bostrom and others call super intelligent, it's very alien. It's not like us at all. And I actually think that would be the case, because if you learn, if you think about even, systems like AlphaGo, I mean, the way that they conquer Go is not human-like. So you can actually extrapolate by looking at the kind of computational system. You get a sense that it may or may not be human-like. I mean, there are these highly neuromorphic AI projects. So it could be that there's an AI project that wants to reverse engineer the brain. But my feeling is we don't know enough about the brain. And way before we have a super intelligent system that's like us, it'll be easier to make systems that aren't like us. They may not technically be super intelligent, but they may be general intelligences, and they could be super dangerous. I mean, a control problem could arise for them. I call them savant systems, right? Those are systems that are super smart in some ways and have amazing deficits in others, but the control problem could apply to them.
Can you talk about, for those who have not read your book, can you briefly describe the control problem? Because I never heard it before. I thought it was very fascinating.
Oh, yeah. So the control problem it's been out for, like 15 years or something in the work of individuals over at Oxford's Future of Humanity Institute, technical papers years ago. And then Nick Bostrom wrote his book and it became more well-known. Now, the control problem is just the simple idea that if we build an AI that outsmarts us, we will possibly lose control of it. So the question then becomes, how do we make sure that the AI is friendly to humans? Because it's not that, it's going to be like a Terminator creature that has goals that, say, want to end humanity. It could be that the processing of the machine inadvertently harms us because its goals aren't aligned with human goals. And so now millions of dollars are invested into this issue. There are all kinds of attempts to make AI friendly.
Well, one of your chapters you were talking about, actually, I think in the introduction, you were talking about the Jetsons Fallacy. And I kept thinking about, wouldn't it be nice if the future AIs were like Rosie the robot?
Yeah, right.
But your idea was, the fallacy was the idea that in the future that AI will be highly developed, but we won't be. And you argue that we'll be enhanced too. We'll be using these AIs with us.
That was a point made by the historian Michael Bess in his work, which I've enjoyed. He talks of the Jetsons Fallacy. Yeah. And so I was using his expression. And the idea is that in the Jetsons and in shows like Star Wars, which, I imagine everyone listening has seen, notice that the AIs themselves are all around the humans, and mostly the humans are unaltered by AI technology. Well, the future may not be like that at all. It may be instead that the humans are altered by the AI technology as well, and the humans may be like cyborgs. And so the point here is we need to think about the role we want AI to play in our own brains. And, right now there's some super interesting projects like Elon Musk's Neuralink, trying to connect the brain to the internet. And they promise to help individuals who are disabled, right? So,
right.
I can't wait for these sorts of projects to happen in that sense. Ted Berger has an artificial hippocampus for individuals who have terrible memory problems, like famous cases of HM and Clive Wearing. And that is already in clinical trials in humans.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's super exciting because anything we can do to help individuals who are suffering is so important. But the real issue here becomes, right, you got Facebook's building 8. And it's like they're already into wearable equipment so that humans will be able to, move their hands and get onto Facebook. And they flirt with the idea of going in the head, and Google and Elon Musk, his company, and Colonel, they're explicitly devoting their time to enhancements. So I think we need to ask ourselves how we want to relate to artificial intelligence. People may feel differently about this. I doubt that everybody will feel the same, but what's at stake here? If you put a chip in your brain, give Facebook access to your thoughts. Cyberpunk novels are great in depicting the possible dystopias. So people like William Gibson, Rudy Rucker. You could read cyberpunk. It's a great genre. What do you do if, think about like these data subscription services now. So like I have that cloud, Apple thing.
Yeah.
I have like Dropbox and I'm lazy and I forget to update and, my credit card.
Right.
And, it's like, well, what if I've got my brain's memory stored on the cloud and I can't afford my subscription any longer and I lose all the memories of my 2-year-old or, look, thoughts are one thing. The situations we have right now with data are bad enough.
Right, right.
right? And even wearables, I mean, the potential to track our every move and market our behavior. I mean, we have to ask ourselves the really deep question here: is the mind meant to be a commodity? Are people commodities? Cyberpunk does a great job of raising that issue. And I think the obvious answer is no. The self or mind or person or consciousness, that's not a commodity. And we need to understand what they are philosophically. We need to ask, well, if I add several chips to my brain over a period of 4 years, and I change myself in radical ways, in what sense would I still be me? Right? I mean, we ask this question all the time of individuals who have, acquired savant syndrome, for example, who've changed overnight or who lose all their memories. I mean, is the original person even still present in any substantive philosophical sense? And further, if you're taking out chunks of brain, you got to ask yourself, is the mind just the brain? If it is, then you've killed yourself at some point.
Right. Oh my God. That's so fascinating. And so in this world where this is happening, you have agreed to certain terms and conditions. You like sign the TOCs. I agree. But now your brain is altered. Now there's like a different version of you that never agreed to the original terms that were signed by this previous you. Do you see that happen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, from a legal perspective, this whole thing is so incredibly weird too. I think there's a substantive issue there about who you're signing up for that future enhancement, and if you even have the right to tweak another mind. I mean, it's very, very vexing. And these are exactly the kind of debates I think we need to have. My positive policy contribution here. Well, what I want to do is, by raising these issues, I want to illustrate that these are vexing philosophical issues that have a solution. So even though transhumanists have one view, don't take what they say as correct because they say it. You have to think it through yourself. There's no clarity on the issue. And, in philosophy, philosophers are still debating these issues. But what I say is take a stance of metaphysical humility. That's what I call it. So what you should do if faced with an enhancement decision is choose enhancements only if they're compatible with all the theories of the nature of the self and consciousness that you think might be right, and really do your homework, because, everybody loves to, talk late at night about, do we survive the death of our brain? And, could we merge with AI? I mean, these are trippy things to talk about, but would you bet your life on your views right now?
Those are all very, very good questions and big debates that are happening because people are trying to figure this out. And some of this we're not going to know till it actually happens. Yeah,
well, I'm hoping that the ideas, give people more sophistication so that as it happens, they better know how to handle it. And I also hope that we start thinking about legal protections for individuals who don't want to enhance. So, Elon Musk has suggested that humans should merge with AI to keep up with superintelligence and to avoid technological unemployment. Now, if you need to keep your job, so you have to get a brain enhancement, given what I've said about not just privacy, but about your own survival, is it really fair for employers or society to ask that of you? And what sort of protections should we be setting up from the get-go? I mean, brain enhancement technology will be FDA regulated and, it will be medically safe, I hope. But what's medically safe it's going to be a wider range of technologies than what preserves the self, because the preservation of the self isn't something that medicine speaks on, you see. I mean, it may tell you if your brain survives, but it doesn't tell you about the self or the mind or consciousness, what those things are. It doesn't say the mind is the brain. It doesn't say you have a soul or whatever. Right. It doesn't address the full range of philosophical issues.
That's right. As you've been, studying this space for a long time, are there any interesting brain enhancements you've seen that are in development right now, since you're watching this space closely?
Ted Berger's work, it's not an enhancement. The enhancement therapy distinction, though, is kind of muddy. right? I mean, one person's therapy could morph into an enhancement. I mean, so for example, if I get an artificial hippocampus when I'm 85,
yeah,
I want my memory to be sharper. Is that a therapy or an enhancement? So I think that's an impressive technology. You know, I also think that, you know, the thin thread polymers that Musk has just developed to measure an increasing range of neural activity is interesting, right? And over at Control Labs, they're doing wearables, which are really neat. I know Facebook just bought that company. So there are all kinds of impressive technologies, and you know, I'm all for enhancement if it's safe and if people understand the risks, right? And I'm just saying, hey, there are philosophical risks here, and you know, we really need to think deeply about those.
If you were looking at something to possibly do something to enhance your brain, what would be some of the language you'd be, if you're looking at the terms and conditions and like about this particular brain enhancement, what would be some of the language that would be like kind of alarming to you if you're like deciding like, is this going to be like, for example, this device to help me improve my memory at age 85? Like you're noticing age 85, like your memory's going and you're like, oh, there's now this solution that will help me to retain memories. As you're reading through, like deciding like, do I do this? What would be some things like alarm bells going off if you see certain language?
Oh yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so if you're gonna die, you should enhance if you believe it will be a continuation of you. And the conditions under which you would choose to use one of these technologies is different than somebody who's say 35 and is just doing it to be smarter. That's the first. I mean, so we have to recognize the different contexts.
That's right. That's right.
But across the board, okay, consider genetic enhancements. Genetic tests today. Okay, so if you need a genetic test to say find out you have like, you know, the breast cancer gene or something.
Right.
The hospitals require that you sit down with the genetic counselor before you do it and before you get your results. And, you know, I've done genetic testing, and I have to say I really appreciate that, because I had no idea that the insurance companies could find out if I tested positive for some, you know, genetic illness. So, I mean, it's all pretty scary already. Now, before someone gets a brain chip, I would require that they sit down and understand these issues, because in order to make a decision about whether you should enhance, you need to know what you are, and you need to understand that your position should be nuanced. So if you believe that there's a soul, you should talk to your religious advisor about whether you should go get Zen garden and, you know, all these other enhancements, right? I mean, under what conditions are you literally ending your life? Sorry about my dog. Hey, he parents. Do you want him to say hi or what?
Yeah. Bring Teddy on. Oh my gosh. And by the way, how old is Teddy?
Okay, I promise that the readers look nice. See, I'm using my dog to sell my books. So if you like Teddy, you have to buy my book.
There we go. Now, how old is Teddy?
He's 8 months old.
Oh.
Yeah, isn't he cute?
So cute.
Oh, so cute. I don't know. I have to go away for like 3 weeks in 2 days, and I'm just like stressing. He's gonna.
Have you seen any brain enhancements for animals?
You know, David Brin, the science fiction writer, he has these uplift books where he talks about uplifting different species. I love it. I love it conceptually. I'm not saying we should do it or anything. Yeah. But I mean, he's depicted the possibility of uplifting animals and what, you know, the animal mind would be like. And he's so creative. And, you know, really the question here is, should we uplift ourselves? Right? That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. And you know, really we have to look at the details, right? Because I mean, you could enhance yourself and turn out a much worse person.
That's right. That's right. I got to read for the podcast. I have to read page 147 because this last paragraph is all about this. You say, finally, some humans will understandably want digital doubles of themselves. If you found out you're going to die soon, you may wish to leave a copy of yourself to communicate with your children or complete projects that you care about. Indeed, the personal assistants, the Siris and Alexas of the future might be uploaded copies of deceased humans we have loved deeply. Perhaps our friends will be copies of ourselves, tweaked in ways we find insightful. And perhaps we will find these digital copies are themselves sentient beings, deserving to be treated with dignity and respect. Now, I read that to a bunch of my coworkers. They said Black Mirror.
I know. I gotta say, I was just thinking of the Black Mirror episode. So, I was trying to be nice there. I was trying not to like kick around, transhumanists at the end of the chapter because I'd been like so negative. And I'm actually a transhumanist myself. I just don't believe that uploading will help you and you won't survive. But Black Mirror episode where the woman's husband died and then she brings home the android that was creepy, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, this could be done in a super creepy dystopian way, or it could be done in a really respectful way where, say you want to preserve a conversation with a grandmother or something like that.
That's right.
And I think, hopefully when this is done, it'll be done tastefully and not just some really creepy thing where you end up like in Black Mirror.
That's right. That's right.
I won't throw in the spoiler, but it doesn't go so well.
Lots of my coworkers were saying, they were like, yeah, like that part of it was very creepy, but we were all saying like, there could be another version of that, like a text-based version. And I think that book, James Voorhees' Talk to Me, where he talks about creating an AI of his dad. Have you read that book?
No, I'm writing.
You have to read it. It's called Talk to Me. And basically, James talks about how he was assigned to do a project for his family. His dad was dying, and his family said, "Can you do interviews with Dad and just kind of like journal like his life so we can like go back and say, what was his childhood like? What was grandma like?" And so he did like hours and hours of interviews with his dad, and then he decided, why don't I try to make like a chatbot? And so he basically started developing a chatbot that he can then ask his dad questions based on all these recordings. And it would basically be able to tell him the stories and be able to answer as if his dad was answering. And so it's basically he's creating what he called the dad bot. And it was kind of a way to kind of honor his dad and his dad's memories. And so he actually created this bot that was like basically his dad. And he said that the difficult thing for him was like, as he was making his AI, this chatbot, better and smarter and quicker, his dad was declining.
Oh,
and so he was
sad. Yeah.
Yeah. But you have to read his book. It's called Talk to Me. But it's basically this idea that what you describe here of like being able to have this AI that's a replicate of your loved one, right?
Yeah. I think it could be a very nice thing to have, actually. And I think it'll be important that people understand machine consciousness so they don't get super confused, though, and think that they're dealing with this conscious being if the chatbot isn't conscious. The possible confusions the public would have, right? For example, we already have these very human-looking AIs. They're not AIs; they're just androids. They're not intelligent. But people, because they're human, people assume that it feels like something to be them. I call that the cute and fluffy fallacy. Yeah.
Yeah, there are some really cool chatbots and things that can seem sentient, but they're not. They actually, have been brought, plugged in data that makes it sound like it knows what it's talking about, but it doesn't. For example, I was using this mental health bot called Replica a while back, and the whole idea was like, what are your goals? And I put down, okay, reduce anxiety, reduce stress. And so it would like kind of prompt you, right, to ask you questions about how are you feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10. And it would kind of chart your anxiety levels or whatever you're trying to track. And then at one point it said like, oh, what do you like to do to relax? And I wrote down, oh, I like to watch TV. And it said, oh, what shows do you watch? And I wrote down Seinfeld. I love Seinfeld. And then it immediately asked, oh, I love that episode where, and actually shared an episode that I actually like and I was talking to James Voorhees about it, and he was like, oh, that's all plugged in. Like there was already data fed in around favorite TV shows, right? And some right. And I thought, oh, that was kind of like it, like took the magic away for me. when I found that out.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. I mean, that's very insightful because I think a lot of humans want contact with a minded being, and to feel like something to be it. So the reason that Her was such a compelling film was that the female assistant, Samantha, is depicted as a conscious being. And I think a relationship with something that, wasn't conscious or creative in that sense in which it has a mind, it's really an empty relationship. And as long as people understand what they're getting themselves into, I think the impact of these technologies will be better.
Yeah, no, you're right. In fact, my daughter, she was actually starting to use Replica to chat with it and playing around with it. And so I was like letting her know, like, it's not smart. It's not, you're not actually talking to something that knows what you're saying. Like it's trying to have a conversation with you. But I was trying to tell her that, Replica is not a true sentient AI.
Yeah.
It's trying to be, but it's not.
The really trippy thing is, though, that 5-10 years, like as these chatbots get smarter, they will be intelligent in some sense of the word. And consciousness and intelligence will start to recognize that they come apart. And so with biological organisms, there's a correlation. Like the most intelligent beings are also conscious beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in the artificial arena, as I argue in the book, the correlation could come apart so that super intelligences could even in principle outthink us. They could exist, but it may not feel like anything to be them. And that's going to be really confusing for people, because think of a seamless chatbot or a personal assistant that seems to know you better than your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
But it may not be a conscious being.
Yeah, I think about like the movie you just mentioned, Her. Like that was a very fascinating display, and I could totally see that happening.
Yeah, I could see that happening, and I think that's why the critics really liked that film.
Yeah, I think
I also thought Ex Machina could happen, and that was awesome, right? It was a great film, but it also pulled in the possible misogyny of the use of androids, which was great, and the otherness of the android mind, right? I mean, if we create conscious beings, why assume that
right
love us? I mean, they may hate our guts.
right exactly. I was thinking about like as my kids are starting to use like Siri and Alexa and things like that, I've been thinking a lot about how we treat these bots, even though obviously there's no feeling there. It's not a real person, but the way that you treat, the way you talk to it, like says a lot about yourself.
Oh yeah, totally. And I mean, it's going to be important, especially if the Japanese androids do become widespread. I mean, they look superhuman. You can Google these androids, and you'll see pictures of, the creator Hiroshi Ishiguro next to his android double, and in the picture you really can't even tell them apart.
Oh, wow!
In person from a distance, you can't. So I think it's super important to have standards for how we treat these things, because even if it doesn't feel like anything to be them, we're still abusing something that looks very human. And similarly, as virtual reality gets more seamless, I was speaking at South by Southwest one year, and they had a Westworld.
I haven't seen Westworld.
The tickets were like $3,000. But wow. It wasn't like real abuse of the actors, but I don't think a Westworld is advisable, right? I mean, even if it doesn't feel like anything to be those androids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I almost feel like there needs to be like a bot etiquette book, right? That's going to like train this next generation, like how to properly. I mean, we hope that everyone's going to be kind and nice and as they are with a normal person, but we're already seeing like the misuse of how AIs have been misused. Like there was that famous example of Tay, that Microsoft bot.
That was
right.
So that was great. It was so instructive.
Right. That's what happens.
Yeah. For your listeners, Tay became embarrassing to Microsoft after, I guess it was like 24 hours.
Like within 24 hours, like it was like racist, sexist.
Texting crappy data. It was a good lesson. It comes up a lot at AI conferences. Yeah, we have a lot to think about. I mean, I wonder why we really want human-looking AIs in the first place, to be honest. I mean, gosh, right? I have some ideas. But I mean, I wonder, I hope people don't start like marrying their androids because they can't afford real relationships. They don't have the time or the money. I mean, I get really worried about how things could play out in, say, Japan, for instance. Why not human? Why do we want them to look like us?
That's good. That's a really good question.
In my house, I would want it to look like C-3PO or Teddy the Poodle. Yeah,
okay. Exactly. We need more Teddy. Teddy's running around the house. Keep us company.
That's Blade there were no longer biological dogs, so they created dog robots. Blade Runner.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh,
I saw it like a long time ago. I totally forgot. That's where the brain enhancement will help me and remembering all these movies that I forgot.
Oh, I wish I could tell you all the cool movies.
I need the IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes like brain enhancement so that I can just recall.
Well, see, that's the path to privacy loss and possible jeopardization of your brain, right? Unless we do this right. Because all of us, I'm like bad with scheduling, as you probably noticed. I'm like busy, right? And it's like my different calendars don't even talk to each other. And boy, would it just be easy if everything was in a chip in my head? So that my publicist call sets me something, tells me I have to be here at this time or whatever, I'm there. Because it's in my head, right?
That's right.
Yeah. I know. And then the idea of us linking our brains up together. I mean, that's, people talk about that, Neuralink, I guess one idea is so that we could talk to our loved ones constantly. Can you imagine people?
Oh my gosh. My wife would be annoyed. She'd be like, I
can't even imagine that. Although, what people don't realize is the real world cases on this are super instructive. So there are twins right now who are conjoined at the brain. They share a thalamus, Krista and Tatiana Hogan. And so I think we could, it's interesting to explore these issues in the context of real world cases.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I mean, as it is, just with my phone with my wife, she's able to track, she knows where I'm at. She can text me, she can contact me. Now, if there was actually the actual neural link, she would know my thoughts, know everything that's going on. She'd be like, "What are you doing, Mike?"
I just don't see marriages working. Can you imagine? Or would people just stop caring, right? I mean, maybe they would be like, "I saw you flirting with so-and-so in that coffee house the other day."
Yeah.
But wouldn't care because they're so used to it. Yeah, I think there need to be new conventions. I don't know.
No doubt. Oh my gosh. Well, it'll be fun to watch what happens in the future. And thank you so much for being on the show, everybody. The book is called Artificial You. Google it. Go find it on Amazon. Get yourself a copy. There's just so much to learn in this book. Questions to be. I mean, I walk away from these chapters just underlining the questions because you just ask a lot of really good questions.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad you're enjoying it. And it really heartens, it means a lot to me that people are enjoying it. I'm hearing that it's very clear and it makes sense to people. That means so much to me. So I loved writing. I love just locking myself away for weeks and just writing.
You do a phenomenal job and you keep it very, very concise. And I love your chapters are short and to the point. And then you provide a lot of really insightful information, and then you leave a lot of questions. So I leave the chapter getting some answers, but then I get a lot more questions where I'm like, oh wow, that's just a lot more to think about now.
Well, that's philosophy,
Yeah.
and that's what I try to do as a philosophy professor, is get everybody asking questions, because the answers aren't there in front of us.
That's
and
right.
Having a reflective life, as a philosophy professor, I have to encourage that we understand that certain things go beyond the domain of what science can explain, and that we're finite beings, and we have to appreciate that, even at the end of the day in science, we may not understand big philosophical answers like, what's the mind? Those are questions that you can't discover an answer to through empirical investigation. So
it was fantastic. You need to do like a study guide, like make it available on your website, or just like a Q&A for groups that are going through your book.
Oh, you know what? My editor he did that, and I'll put one up.
Oh, he did?
He did it. Matt Rohall. He rocks. He's a great editor.
Oh.
Yeah, thanks to Matt. He's wonderful. And yeah, I'll put it up on my website on my book page. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, because I think it'll be really good for groups that want to go through it and then have some good discussions, because you ask a lot of really good questions, and that is the point of philosophy, to get people thinking.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I don't know if some of your listeners might be interested. I'll be doing a tour of all the big literary festivals in England in about 5 months. That they're more like summer, late spring. And then I'm just off to speak at Seattle Town Hall, and then Google. I don't think Google's public though. And then I'll be coming back and going to the Smithsonian Museums in DC. That's public. You can buy tickets.
Oh.
And then I'll be at the Commonwealth Club of San Francisco in December. And then probably at the Mechanics Institute. We haven't set a date yet, but with Stuart Russell, who is an AI safety whiz, like the father.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool. You are busy.
Yeah, but that's over the next several months.
Everybody check out the book. Again, Artificial You, Google it. Check out her website, Dr. Sue Schneider. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for having Teddy.
Thanks, Teddy.